Asia Tech Podcast with Graham Brown and Michael Waite.
Hello and welcome to Asia Tech Podcast Stories. My name is Graham Brown. We are all about the stories that make the Asian tech ecosystem so fascinating, so exciting, so dynamic. All these people from all over the world coming to Asia to make that ecosystem one of the most interesting in the world. So here today to share a story with us, we have a young gentleman from Czech Republic named Jan Smejkal, if I've got the pronunciation right. I mean, he's just kind of briefed me on that. So let's start there. Jan, first of all, welcome to the show.
Well, Graham, thank you very much. And you got it 100% right, I would say. So it was really, really well pronounced. And thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for having me on the show.
It wasn't that difficult. Well, it's great to have you here. So just a bit of background on Jan first. Jan is chief curator of China Biz Tech Weekly. He also runs Startup Grind in China, based in Shenzhen. He's also got a number of other ventures, which we'll talk about as well. Describes himself as your guy in China. You're in a great position at the moment. You are our man in China who can give us an understanding of this market. I want to know, Jan, before we start, why did you end up in China? What was the story? Was it part of your master plan? So you were started in Czech Republic, in China. What's going on here?
Yeah, definitely not a master plan. Honestly, when I was at the university in Czech Republic, I was studying economics and finance and basically finishing my bachelor. I had always dreamed about having a business, being an entrepreneur. And so when I was in my third year of bachelor, I teamed up with my classmate and we were like, let's start some business, And I remember I read article on Forbes about Xiaomi, about the CEO and founder Lei Jun. I guess you have heard about this company, but back in the days, it was really, really hyped up because everybody was talking or everybody was saying that it's going to be the next Steve Jobs or it's Steve Jobs of China because he created this company selling phones for half the price of everybody else and the quality is amazing and stuff like that. And so, I basically saw it as an opportunity to jump into it and to get those phones from China and sell them in Czech Republic and Slovakia. And so that was the idea. And we basically did that. So we were two guys and we had no money. And what we did, we just went to Alibaba. I ordered one phone, had it shipped to Czech Republic to test it out to see if it's really that good, as everybody said. After 1 month testing it out, I was like, yes, this is amazing. And so we just started a business. We went to Alibaba. We started ordering phones, 1, 2, 3 phones every month and selling them on eBay of Czech Republic, let's say. And then we started a proper business afterwards once the business got bigger. So we set up a company and we started really doing it in a proper way and building the business. And so basically, me moving to China was a very practical decision at that point because we had a business that was linked to China, which, as I said, it was about dealing with these phones and accessories, and it was growing. And so I was like, okay, it's time to go to China to explore, to meet our suppliers face to face and see if we can do something bigger, even bigger than we were doing at that point. So very practical decision, actually.
Right. So you don't run that business anymore, or you do? What was your interest?
No, I don't. So I ran that business for 2.5 years, and then I ended up selling 50% of the company to my co-founder, to my original co-founder, because, I was living in China and I saw what's going on here and I wanted to do a little bit different stuff. I wanted to go bigger, but my co-founder wasn't aligned in that mission or vision. And so we decided that we're going to split. I sold him the business. The business is still up and running, but I'm not part of that anymore. And as you mentioned at the beginning, I'm doing some other stuff. So I'm running Startup Grind and I'm involved in different projects, kind of side hustles that I'm doing right now. And that's it. That's where I'm at right now.
We'll talk about those in a minute. Did you speak any Mandarin before you got to China?
Of course not.
Right. So where did that happen? Because it's not like everybody speaks English. I mean, there's a big expat community, but you need Mandarin to get by, right?
Yeah, you need it. And, so I speak a little bit of Mandarin now. Of course, I cannot say that I'm fluent in Mandarin after 2.5 years, even though it would be great, but I'm still working on it. But yes, you're right. So as I said, I didn't know anything about China before we started doing that business at the first place. So I didn't have any, as you mentioned, master plan or long-term plan that I'm going to go to China. I'm going to study Mandarin at high school and stuff like that. As many people that I meet here in China did have this kind of master plan, but I didn't. And so I didn't speak any Mandarin when I moved. And, honestly, when I first came to China, the very first intention that I had in my mind was that I am going to leave after 6 months. I'm just going to be here for 6 months. I'm going to explore the market because just to give you the whole story. So I came here as part of an exchange program because I told you I was still at the university when we started the business. And so the easiest way how to get to China was that I found the university and I went for the exchange program at the university. I got the visa, but the exchange program was only for 6 months initially. And so that was my intention from the very beginning. I'm going to go here. I'm going to explore. I'm going to meet some people. I'm going to learn something about China, maybe grow the business, finish six months of the exchange program. And I'm going to go back to Czech Republic and run the business from Czech Republic. That was the initial idea, but it never ended up being like that.
It never does, right?
Yeah, because I was just too excited, when I first came and when I saw what's going on here, the energy, the speed, the dynamics. And yeah, as you mentioned, Asia in general is one of the most exciting ecosystems when it comes to tech right now because it's growing so much. It has still, of course, a long way to go to catch up. It's still catching up. But it's just so exciting because everybody is so eager to learn and to build businesses and to succeed. And so that's why I ended up staying.
Right. So I'm curious, I'm sure listeners want to know is that you had graduated, you had exited this business, you'd come to an arrangement with your existing co-founder. You're now in China. How did you manage to stay? What kind of visa did you manage to work out to... because I imagine that's the big question that a lot of people think about. Okay, I want to go to China, but, maybe I want to leave a business or leave a company to go to China. So how did you work out?
Yeah, so my case is a little bit special. So as I said, I went here to study at the university or to study at to be part of the exchange program. And so I got a student visa, I got a residence permit at the first place, and then after those 6 months, actually the university came to me and said your results are great, and I think you can contribute even more. And so basically they offered me the opportunity to stay longer to finish the studies at this university in China, the master degree, and they gave me scholarship for that, which means that they even prolonged my visa. And so you mentioned that I've graduated. I haven't actually. So I haven't graduated yet because I started the master program in China, and I am now in the process of finishing my thesis, which is the only thing left for me. And so I'm still on the residence permit, basically being a student, which, as I said, it's a little bit special case for me because at the end of the day, I am not employed in China, so I can do that, right? Because if you want to be employed, if you want to have a job in China for a Chinese company and stuff like that, then you would probably have to have a working visa or something like that. But I am not employed in China. I'm basically like working as a freelancer. That's kind of like, how we figured it out with the company that I'm working for right now, because that's the only way kind of to do it right now since I'm still at the university. So that's why my case is a little bit special. But yes, honestly, when it comes to visa in China, it's not as difficult as it used to be. You just need to either find somebody who has a company here who can help you with getting a visa or inviting you to work for them or to do whatever you want to do. Or if you move here, you can get some short-term visa anyways if you want to run business, and then you probably want to set up a company which is called WFOE, wholly foreign-owned enterprise, and then you can get a visa. Just through that company. So it's not as difficult as it used to be, but of course you need to kind of take it into account that it takes some time.
Right, got it. Interesting, and thanks for sharing some of the options there. So let me understand. You were studying in Czech Republic, you moved to China, you didn't finish your studies in the Czech Republic, and then you got onto this master's course in China. That was in Beijing, correct?
It's in Shenzhen, actually.
It's in Shenzhen,
Peking University. It's Peking University, but it's Peking University HSBC Business School, which is based out of Shenzhen or in Shenzhen. So I'm in Shenzhen, and I've been in Shenzhen for the whole time, basically.
Okay, got it. How old are you now, Jan?
I am 26.
You're 26. So in the sort of your network of people in China, are the sort of people of the same kind of age? I mean, still, it's quite young. I mean, I moved, just thinking myself, I moved from Europe to Asia when I was 24, 25.
Okay.
So I moved to Tokyo. But that was the... You know, back in the 90s, I'm a little bit older, but back in the 90s, that was the thing. Like, when people graduated, China wasn't a thing back then. You know, people went straight to Japan because Japan was still the economy, the place in technology, Sony, all these kind of people, right? So I moved when I was 24, but outside of, you know, people teaching English and studying, there weren't any entrepreneurs in Asia at the time who'd come from outside. So I'm just curious about your network. I mean, do you see young people similar kind of age moving to China?
Yeah,
it's happening.
Absolutely.
Who aren't studying, who aren't, you know, doing the teach English thing. What's it like right now?
Yeah, you know, actually, yes, I definitely see a lot of people that are the same age or even younger, you know, and, you know, I think it's given by the fact that, especially when we talk about the US, you know, it's you basically finish the university when you're like 21, right? Because you don't go for a master's degree in the US because they don't really think it's a thing, right? So for me, it's a little bit different because in Czech Republic, it's basically, yes, you go for bachelor, which you're gonna finish around 21, 22 or 23, and then you go for another 2 years for a master's, right? And so that's how it is. But now I see a lot of people from the US and the people that I spent a lot of time with that are building businesses or are joining startups in China or are doing something in China. Like, they're actually those guys, as you mentioned. So they had this master plan. They studied Chinese at high school. They studied Chinese at the university or at college, And now they move to China. They already have pretty good understanding of the market because they speak some Chinese. And now they're just coming here excited and being part of the ecosystem. So yes, there is a lot of people the same age as I am, even younger, and of course you can see some people that have been here for a long time. So I have a lot of friends that have been in China for 10, 15 years, and they basically know everything about China. They speak fluent Chinese, and they are now kind of cashing in because they are in a very good position right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's exciting. And I mean, Josh was on the show, Josh Steinley was on the show the other day and talking about his move to Shenzhen, which is where you're based, which is, I don't think a lot of people know about Shenzhen, especially outside of Asia. People won't have heard of it. I mean, people will know Hong Kong, maybe they know like Canton, Guangdong and so on. But, so what I want to know is, firstly, when you moved to China, so you were 23, 24, right? You moved.
I was 23. Yeah, I was 23.
So you moved from China, from the Czech Republic to China. Yeah. So I'm curious to know about how your expectations were the same and different. So you had this image of what China was like because you'd been dealing with China, you'd been importing Xiaomi phones for some time, so you had some kind of experience, but you'd never really lived there or experienced it in business. So what was that like in terms of your expectations? And also, once you tell us a little bit about that, tell us a little bit about what Shenzhen's like for somebody who's new.
Yeah, absolutely. So my expectations were completely wrong. That's one thing that I'm going to tell you right now, because as I said, again, I'm going to repeat myself that I didn't know anything about China before I started even thinking about going to China. And then you hear all of these things about China, how polluted it is, and, the communism and this and that, whatever, like this kind of mainstream media things that you hear all over the place and from your friends and from people around you about China, right? Like nobody really, especially back like 3 years ago, nobody in my circles in Czech Republic, nobody really talked about China when it comes to tech, when it comes to businesses and Tencent. Like I didn't know Tencent, I guess 3 years ago, or 4 years ago. And like when you look at it now, when I'm here or what's going on right now, it's just one of the most exciting places, when it comes to tech and venture capital, entrepreneurship and social media, and like companies are copying these kind of companies and these business models and platforms like WeChat and whatever, because it's just very, very exciting, And so yeah, my expectations were completely wrong because I thought, yeah, I'm just going to go to China. It's going to be very difficult and this. And yes, it is difficult, but Shenzhen kind of blew my mind, because it's one of the most livable cities in China because, there is some pollution from time to time, especially during the winter times. But now when I look at the sky, it's blue and there is nothing, and it's nice weather. It's like 30 degrees, 28 degrees. So it's one of the most livable cities in China. And at the same time, it's one of the most or one of the fastest growing cities in China and the world, and I think Josh mentioned on the podcast that you did with him that, they finished so many skyscrapers in Shenzhen alone just last year and this and that. And it's true, but also the transformation, like so many people move here from all around China to search for opportunities to, work for Tencent. And because Tencent is based here in Shenzhen, they have like 3 headquarters or 3 different buildings here. And so there is a lot of opportunities and it's just mind-boggling, because yes, it's Shenzhen, but you also mentioned Guangdong area, right? So you have this Greater Bay. So people now talk about Zhuhai, Macau, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Hong Kong, how it's all going to be connected, and it's going to be basically something like Silicon Valley, New York City, and all of these kind of ecosystems, but all at the same place, And so people talk about it like this. We'll see what's going to happen. Of course, it's going to take some time. They're now building up the infrastructure, but every single time or once in a while, you hear about these major projects that government is trying to build this mega city or this mega area that is just going to be amazing, So and yes, you can see that it's happening, that they're building these buildings and investing so much money. So there is something happening for sure.
So if I was an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur in Europe, let's say I was in Czech Republic, could be anywhere, and I was looking at China and looking at life there without having much knowledge of it, I'm sure, and maybe some of your friends back home think this, is that they think that, Europe is the, it's the home of liberal democracy. It's the home of, like enterprise and so on, not as much so as the United States, but still people assume, especially a place like Czech Republic, it's, history is relatively new when it comes to, like Western democracy, if I can use that term. So, people think that that's, what life is going to be like, what life should be like. But you go to this place like China and, I think people are blown away, as you said, right? I mean, they just don't expect what they expect, right? What they see when they get there is completely different. And I'm just curious in terms of business as well, what it's like. So, you are there, you have some experience of business back in Europe, but then you get to China. People assume, you mentioned it already, that China's going to be bureaucratic, right? But, what's it like in Shenzhen? Is it a place where, there's a lot of bureaucracy, you have to negotiate the bureaucracy, or do you find it very pro-business? Do you find it the fact that, people there really want to get things done, and there's a real different attitude to, say, back in Europe?
It's... Of course, it depends how you look at it, because yes, there is definitely a lot of bureaucracy, and you can find, it depends what you want to do, right? But when we talk about setting up a company or getting a visa and stuff like that, like in many aspects, China is very very open, let's say, or because I don't know, because I never had to like get a visa for any country in Europe, whatever. But I don't know what's the process when somebody outside of Europe needs to get a visa or something. I don't know what's the process. But for example, in Shenzhen or in Shanghai and these big cities, now you can come and you can get a visa on arrival for 5 days, and you can explore, you can see, and it wasn't possible like 2 years ago, but now it's fairly possible. Also, when we talk about setting up the company in China, so I remember when we were setting up a company in Czech Republic, it took us also like 1 month or so, to get everything set up. And now in China, it's the same. It takes a couple of weeks to set up this roofie company. Yes, we could get into discussion if that's the right company to set up if you want to do the business in China, or depending on what kind of business you want to do in China. There is more to it. It's on one side, yes, it's getting easier, but on the other side, it's also getting more difficult, because it's not just about setting up a company, come to China, and you think that you can do business. It's much more than that. You need to have local partner. You need to understand the market, culture, whatever. Like, we can talk about that, because I think it's a pretty fascinating topic, because many people think that they're going to come to China, conquer the world, get millions of dollars, whatever, because it's a big market. But it's not like that, and it never was like that, I guess. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it's definitely like one of the most open markets in the world. Definitely, because you look at the VP thing, you look at the fact, it's very hard to get on Facebook, Google, and basically it's impossible for many people in China to get on these things. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of barriers that you need to overcome if you want to come to China, and you need to keep it in mind. You need to be very patient. You really, there are just things that don't work and will never probably work that well compared to Europe and US. But I think it's definitely getting better every single month, and it's also given by the fact that China committed itself to invest $300 billion into entrepreneurship, to support entrepreneurship in China, and to support its innovative culture and entrepreneurial culture. And so of course, they're supporting local entrepreneurs, but at the same time, they're trying to figure out how they can attract talent from overseas, because that's when the innovation truly happens, when you have diversity and talent from all around the world, and people, the smartest people, are attracted to certain place. So it's definitely changing. We'll see what's going to happen. It's also very unpredictable, though, so that's something that you need to keep in mind.
Okay, very interesting. Well, I want to talk about your work in your projects that you're involved in China. So You've got China Biz Tech Weekly and also Startup Grind. You're also studying as well, so not to forget that that's a full-time commitment. So China Biz Tech Weekly, what is that about?
Yeah, so actually at this point, I kind of stopped that project, and I'm trying to figure out what's going to be the next step. But basically, I started this thing I think like 6 months ago. And what was the idea behind it was just to share interesting information about China with the rest of the world, and the information that is written in English, because yes, there is a lot of information in China about China in Chinese, but the relevant information about doing business in China and entrepreneurship and startups, it wasn't curated in any way, or I didn't find any resource that I could go to every week and just get a summary of what happened in China that week. And so that was the idea. Basically, what I did, I just did my research. I connected with people that were very knowledgeable about China, that spent a lot of time in China, or that were Chinese and they were writing for Wall Street Journal or New York Times and these kind of publications. And I basically started following these people and started following what they recommend to read, or what they recommend to, or what they write themselves. And I started curating this, or the same with podcasts. So there are a couple of podcasts about Asia and China, but not that many. And so I was basically curating the best episodes about what's going on in China and what people should know about China when they want to come and stuff like that. And I was basically sharing this in a form of newsletter with people around the world. And it wasn't anything big. It was just my hobby, because I wanted to study myself. I wanted to know this information myself in the first place. And so when I was reading it, I just said, okay, so I can just compile it, the best ones that I like the most, and I'm going to share it with people that are also interested. So that was just a very simple idea, just sharing information, interesting information about China in terms of tech.
Okay. So with that, you obviously collected a lot of stories over time. I would like to know, out of all those stories, which was the one that got the most response from people about what was going on in China? Maybe not necessarily the most positive response, but just what got the most reaction? Maybe it's the one that challenged them the most.
That's a good question. Honestly, I actually know that the platform that I used to collect all these articles, I had some data analytics there, and I could look it up, because they tell you which of the articles that I shared actually got the most opens and stuff like that. I don't know. I cannot tell you right now. I don't remember which article was the best or most read. But one of the articles that definitely was one of the most shared was, I don't know if you remember or if you read that article. I think it's a couple months ago, and there was this company from Israel. They invented this phone case that could turn into selfie stick, and then basically they went to Kickstarter, they raised money, and or they were trying to raise money. I don't know if they raised. I don't remember. But in like 2 days, in 2 days since they launched on Kickstarter, there was a Chinese company on Alibaba selling exactly the same thing, like actually selling it, not just raising money, but actually selling the same thing. And so there was a big article about this, how China is copying innovation from all around the world, how they are fast and how they can actually make it happen because they have this supply chain and they have this access. They own the factory and they can just see this idea. And yes, it's not the same. It's definitely not going to be as good because they don't know the engineering behind it, but they can replicate it in a way that it's usable and they can sell it tomorrow for 1/3 of the price. So it was very kind of controversial and also interesting article about what's going on in China.
Yeah, that's always a point that gets raised, isn't it? Protection of IP when you come to China. I was doing an interview with Frank Lavin from Export Now yesterday.
Okay.
He's saying that there's a factory, a Prada factory somewhere in China which can produce 4,000 Prada bags a year. And they are, to an expert, they're almost indistinguishable from a genuine Prada bag. So it's just fascinating. But I mean, as he was saying, the whole IP thing, yes, it's there and it's an issue. But, if you go about it the right way, if you have a process and go out rather than be defensive when you go to China, but be aggressive and go out. And one of the problem is that, people buy this stuff. And they buy it from the fake factories because they can't buy it anywhere else. So if you're really aggressive in the distribution and make sure that you get into those retailers and get into these, different online commerce retailers and so on, then you can protect yourself from IP theft because most people would pay a little bit extra or pay the right price for something if they knew it was genuine. The fact that these guys are able to as you said with this example of the selfie stick, they're able to produce it fast is because they didn't have the distribution already, right? So absolutely. I honestly, again, I know there are different opinions on this. Me, because I've done business myself, and I was actually doing business in a way that I was selling Chinese brand in Czech Republic. Honestly, I have seen what happens, right? So yes, it's about having. No. Let me put it this way, right? So at when you look at it like this, then we as entrepreneurs that want to manufacture something, that want to build some business around something, we actually go to China to get access to the cheap labor or to that supply chain and all of these things, So it's our decision, and we kind of have to keep in mind that that's just normal thing that these factories that you work with, of course, they will learn along the way as they learned with Apple and all of these guys. And yes, some of the people that work in these companies, they are entrepreneurial. They will leave and they will set up their own businesses, and they will use the knowledge that they have gained during that period. And yes, then they're going to become your competitors eventually, right? So this is a normal process that's not only in China. In China, it's manufacturing, and I think people talk about this a lot because China is there is a lot of extremes, right? I hate those copycats that just change one letter in a brand name and then they sell it for 1/10 of the price, right? This is kind of the crazy example that everybody kind of remembers, these copycats, and I don't know the name now, but that's what happens, right? But then also you have companies that really try to do a great job, and they learn from these companies, from these products. They reverse engineer, and honestly, I think it's not only happening in China. I think it happens around the world. Car manufacturers, they learn all of them learn from each other, and then it's about who can actually package it in a way that overall the product is better and it's kind of innovative or something, so it's how you look at it, so there is definitely something that should be protected. There is something about these things that shouldn't happen. And, maybe government can do something about it, or once the economy develops and once the country and everything is going to develop, maybe it's going to change. But also then it's about you trying to be better, because you develop the product,
you know the engineering behind it. And even though some company is going to copy you, it doesn't mean that they will be able to sell as good as you, or they will be able to create community. They will be able to have the same customer service, and they will be able to do the same kind of marketing, because they kind of compete, these copycats, they compete on price, right? They compete on price and speed. They cannot really compete that much when it comes to marketing, because they don't understand the customers in Europe. They don't understand how to do social media, because they don't probably have access. They don't understand Facebook and Twitters and LinkedIn's and Instagrams, So there is always something that you can do to be always one step ahead, So, you can kind of protect yourself by being more innovative and by being better at customer service, building a community around your product, and, maybe even doing next generations of the product. And you will always be better off, because you know what's actually in the product. Those other guys, they are just reverse engineering, and they maybe just guess how it's done and how it's made,
I think moving away from the copycats a little bit and just talking about how advanced the manufacturing is in China. And I think people are constantly surprised by this. And a good example being, I'm a cyclist, so I think when people realize, if you take a famous European brand like a Pinarello, that people think that still have this image that is produced by some, like artisan in Italy, in his workshop, that these are handmade. But, this is all made, like, you think about the cycling frames, the carbon frames, they're all made in a small number, a handful of factories in China. Every single brand is made there. And people are amazed. They think, oh, wow, I thought China was just a whole bunch of copycats. But in terms of that, they have the technology to make the molds, to make the castings, to do very, very technical and highly skilled manufacturing. They are there. And now all these cycling manufacturers, apart from the ones in Taiwan, they do it all in China now. Everything is made in China because it's just so much better for them. It makes sense. I think people are constantly surprised by that. We've moved away now from that stage where China is just copycatting. And like the Japanese, if you go back to the 70s, that was Japan in the 70s, where they just copycatted everything. But now, by the 80s, they're overtaking, and technologically they're more developed. We're sort of seeing, your experience of Xiaomi is a good one. Xiaomi, I think, now people, they're kind of starting to rank alongside other brands. They're trying to establish themselves as a lifestyle brand, but they're no longer the cheapest brand, right? They are now trying to establish themselves as a bit above, the other cheaper commodity brands in the market. So we're starting to see this shift, and this is like the next 10 years, and China establishes itself as, technologically more advanced in manufacturing than other countries in the world.
No, absolutely. The copycat kind of thing, it happens everywhere in the world. Like I remember in Czech Republic, where before we started our business, for example, these Groupons of the world, right? Like we had a local Groupon kind of thing, and I remember that at one point there was like 250 portals that were doing the same thing in Czech Republic, which is 10 million people country.
In Czech?
Yes.
Wow.
And so it was crazy. Of course they died, right? Like many of them died. Some of them were merged, whatever. And now I don't know if you have 10, 15, 20, 30 of them. I don't know. But it happens everywhere, right? Like people see that it's working, that it makes money. So they go into it. And I think we have that perception, right? Like about software, like that perception that you cannot really protect it. So nobody really cares about it that much. And then when it comes to hardware, then people think about the IP. And I guess it's true, right? Like I guess it's true that people are used to in Europe and the US, that they have these patents, and if somebody infringes the patent, then they can sue him and whatever. And of course in China it works a little bit differently. So yeah, it's a different world, but I guess it's so known right now that you should kind of keep that in mind. And if you want to get into that business at the first place, then you need to know that this is probably going to happen, and so you need to figure out a different way how to differentiate yourself and how to make sure that you can succeed. And many people still do, and as you mentioned, you asked about the quality of the manufacturing. Again, like I am not a manufacturing expert. I have never done any manufacturing myself. But yes, there are companies, there are factories that are very good in China. And of course, there are factories that are just focusing on being fast and doing some rip-offs and selling it for 1/3 of the price on Alibaba. And yeah, that's kind of short term, right? Like yeah, it will work. There will always be a customer for that kind of product, especially in China when people cannot really afford having the newest iPhone all the time. Like all of the people in China cannot do that, definitely. So yes, these factories will live. They will make some money. They will be able to survive. But in terms of sustainability of that business, it's very short term behavior, right? But then you have these companies that are manufacturing Apple, Huawei, and Xiaomi and all of these big brands, and like yes, they can, like iPhone is made here, right? So what you have in your hand or what I have in my hand right now, it's made in China. So you can see how high quality the manufacturing can be. You just need to find the right people, the right factories, and you need to be willing to pay the price for that, because of course it's not going to be the cheapest anymore.
Yeah, and it's been fascinating listening to your journey and how you got to China. I'm curious about what comes next in the future. I mean, you're 26 years old now, studying.
Yeah.
A lot's going to change in the next few years. I'll put you on the spot. It's a little bit unfair, but I want to ask the question because I'm sure the listeners are very curious to know as well. So you're 26. By the age of 30, so 3 or 4 years time, do you see yourself as being in China? I know a lot can happen, so it's not like you're committing to this and not asking you to nail your colors to the mast. But 30 years old in China, what do you think? No,
absolutely. As you mentioned, like you never know, right? And especially in China, you never know because things can change, and sometimes some things you cannot even control. So you never know what's going to happen. So you need to keep that in mind that you might not be here in 2 years, or you can be here for 10 years. Who knows? But basically, yeah, I'm very excited about China. I'm very excited about Asia in general. And, thanks to what I do right now, that I'm running Startup Grind in China and APAC, I can meet people from all around Asia, not only China. And I'm just fascinated by the potential that is there, not only in this big country like China, but also, you can look into Southeast Asia and, of course, another huge country, India. I'm just fascinated by that. So I definitely long-term, when it comes to long-term, not even 30 years old, but like probably forever, I want to have this angle that I want to understand Asia. I want to build relationships in Asia. I really, really want to be that guy that will probably leverage it in certain way, either building my business that is going to be related, to Asia, or I'm going to help somebody to bridge Asia and Asia part of the business with the Western part of the business. Who knows? But definitely, I see myself in China, maybe in 2-3 years. I don't know, 30. But in Asia, for sure, long term.
Fantastic. Well, we wish you all the best with that journey, and you're in a great position to do that. You have the master plan, maybe, this time. And it looks like you're in a unique position to be able to help people get a better understanding of that market, not just by being positioned there, but by committing to it as well and being part of the local culture and the local startup scene. So it's fantastic that you came on and shared that with us today. Jan, where can people find out more about you and your journey? So
I rebranded myself online a couple weeks ago because I got a lot of people came to me and said, yeah, you're in China, you're doing these cool things, so like you are my China guy, right? Like, and stuff like that. Like many people came to me like that. And so I basically decided, okay, so when people say that, then it's probably time to brand myself like that. And so it's very easy to find me. I am everywhere as your China guy. So if you go to Twitter, if you go to Instagram or Facebook or all the other social media that are out there, you will find me there as your China guy. And also you can shoot me an email if people want to get in touch and if they have some questions, some reasonable questions about what's going on here and how they can come or what they should do when they come. They can shoot me an email to jan@startupgrind.com, jan@startupgrind.com, and I usually reply to everybody if the message or if the request is reasonable. So yeah, people can find me online or email or just stop by. Come to Shenzhen, join one of our events that we host every single month, and learn something about this exciting place.
Excellent. That's Jan, yourstartupguy.com. Hey, you know what? He's just at the beginning of that. So, I mean, as you said, it's only a couple of weeks into that. So that looks very interesting as a project and a great position to help people out, get a better understanding of the Chinese market. Jan, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing us with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. And if there is anything I can do in the future when it comes to China, please do reach out.
You've been listening to Asia Tech Podcast. Find out more at www.asiatechpodcast.com.